All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Here's Johnny.
Vanity. Definitely my favorite sin.
I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work.
The power of Christ compels you.
This is my boomstick.
What's your favorite scary movie?
What up, horror heads, and welcome to Shiver, a horror movie podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Daniel DeBona.
And I'm David Ulloa.
And we are wrapping up February on what is traditionally the last day of February, recording on February 28th, but we are in a leap year, so we do have one more day. And so to wrap up February, we are finishing up our exploration of Black horror. And this week, we have decided to do the movie Sweetheart. Now, if you go Google Sweetheart, you might see there's a couple of them. We're doing the one from 2019 that is a horror film. So we are doing Sweetheart tonight, and Sweetheart it's something a lot different from something that we've done before. So in a section that we are calling Black Horror on an Island, Dave, just give us your initial kind of overview of what you thought of Sweetheart, man.
Okay, so unrelated to Sweetheart, it is unfortunate that this episode is coming off of the heels of His House.
Correct. It was unfortunate for anybody. This is
for anything. Yeah, there's no chance that anything is going to seem as impressive as it should.
Right.
After having done His House last week.
Yeah, this is the Shiver movie equivalent of the guy that we just hired to replace Nick Saban here at Alabama. If a sports metaphor works better for you.
Like here in Miami, like we're not Nick Saban fans. And yet we still have to say, like, yeah, that's that's not a job you want to.
Right, exactly.
Those are not shoes you want to fill.
Looking forward to you, Coach DeBoer.
As am I, and everyone else.
And everyone else.
We got a shot now. On its own, I think that this was a really great movie. I really enjoyed it. I thought that the mixing of survival and horror was done in a way that I think I haven't seen done this effectively since Predator. And I didn't like it as much as Predator, but it was, I think, the meeting of those two genres was done really, really well. And then there's also like the castaway aspect of this, where this is really Kiersey Clemons just acting her ass off the entire movie. And she did a phenomenal job. And I don't know that this movie works without her.
No.
And she really carries this movie. She does an awesome job of really showing, particularly on her own, what it is that this movie's really about, because it sets up everything that comes once the final two survivors show up. And I think that once that happens, also like Predator, what the movie is really about starts to bubble up to the surface, where this is a movie that is really about racism. Because I was watching this movie thinking, okay, well, obviously Black cast, Black director, this is celebration of Black History Month, so we made a good call here in doing this. And once that element of the story comes in, like, oh, okay, I see where this was leading up to, and it only got better after that. I was curious if it was going to, in fact, like kind of bring the movie down. I was like, no, bring Kiersey Clemons back. I want I want all of her. And it was so much better for it. And I think that it's definitely a movie that you can watch and say, damn, that was a good monster movie. But it's also a movie that you can watch and it makes you think.
Yeah, this is one based on your kind of intro there, when we get to the end here, I think this is one where we're not going to be super far apart, but I think you're a little higher on this movie than I am. I enjoyed it. I'm not in any way going to say I didn't enjoy it, because I did enjoy it. It just didn't quite hit home for me. This was a movie that was a little too subtle at times. It was I feel like I wanted a little bit more. And then by the time I got more, like, it was like, okay, yeah, but it was like, man, I had to wade through like a lot to get here.
Yeah.
That being said, there is a lot of great stuff to talk about when it comes to this movie. I think that the subtlety of the racial message being sent here is done very well. I do think that that part is done excellently. I do think that Kiersey Clemens did a great job just putting this thing on her back and just going. And so that part of it did kind of keep me intrigued. And I'm in this weird place where I don't know if I wanted this movie to be maybe a little bit shorter, even though it's only like 82 minutes long. Like, it's not that long.
Yeah.
And so I'm in this weird place where I'm like, well, maybe there was a little bit of that we could have cut or replaced with something slightly different. I'm kind of in this weird nebulous space with this movie right now. And so this is going to become one of those episodes where I'm very excited to be doing it, because I've just kind of been, like, screaming at the wall about this movie and where I stand, and waiting for the void to answer, right?
Mhm.
To where I stand, because I think about it and I think of, yeah, I really like that and I really like this, and then I think about it and I'm like, yeah, but like, I was kind of bored at this part and I was kind of looking for more out of this and that. I think that one of my problems with this movie is I feel like it was I've used the phrase of something being delightfully underscored before. I feel like this movie was underscored to its detriment. Like, I needed a little bit more to kind of carry me through those scenes of her just struggling to survive, because I'm here for those scenes. I
Yeah.
love that shit. We back when we did Geekmore one time, we did like a survival movies episode. And I love a good montage of like, how am I gonna make it on this island on Mars
Mhm.
now that the world is flooded, just all that shit.
Yeah.
But I think that one place that this movie kind of lost me was, I was like, I needed more than just stings. I didn't need full blown montages. I didn't need Poison blasting in the background when her friend washed up and suddenly look what the cat dragged in plays, right? Like, I don't need.
I would love to see a version of this movie where it's all just 80s glam metal.
Yeah, just cock rock the whole time. I don't need that, but I needed more than just the occasional sting to draw my attention to something.
Mhm.
And I think that is my biggest sticking point. And it seems silly, but in a movie that is very little dialogue for 2/3 of it, I just needed a little bit more out of that. And I think that that's become, oddly enough, like the weirdest foothold in being kind of disappointed in something that I've ever had. But I think that has kind of bothered me. But I don't want anybody who you're at the beginning now being like, oh, Daniel's going to shit on this, I shouldn't listen to this episode. I did enjoy the movie. I liked it. It just, I don't know. I don't feel like it was as good as I kind of hoped it would be once I figured out what the premise was.
I understand that. And I don't think we're going to be as far apart as you think we might
Okay.
be on our final score there. Although I think there will be a little difference.
Right.
The score was definitely something where when it was there, I loved it. And I have sung the praises of synthwave since episode 1 of
Yes.
the show. And I love a good synth score. And I definitely feel like I do want more of the score, but I don't know that it would have makes any sense. But I am there with you. I can't exactly put my finger on why this movie isn't perfect,
Right.
because I don't know what it is exactly that it's missing that I would have wanted more of, but I do know that it's not perfect.
Right. Okay. All right.
And possibly one of the areas in which that is in the story. So in a section that we're calling Castaway Meet Predator, Daniel, what do you think of the story? Is there really a story here at all? Is there anything more than just a premise, and how do you feel about it?
So I think that you absolutely just nailed it right there.
Mhm.
The story here is JSS, just survive somehow.
Yeah.
Right? That's the entire story. There's a premise here, which is, what if you were trapped on an island and some sort of mythical monster was hunting you? And then how does that ramp up survival, right? So once I kind of knew that that's what this movie was about, I was here for the premise. And I really did like that, because when we call it Castaway meets Predator, right? When you're looking at Castaway, that really was like, that was a dramatic take on what the hell you have to do to just survive somehow. So you look at this one and they ramp it up. They say, okay, yeah, well, obviously you need to survive, and yeah, there's coconuts, and you need to find shelter, and you got to do all this, but also you're being hunted, and not just by the feral animals of this island, but you're being hunted by something that is bigger and stronger than you, and you're not a member of an elite commando squad, with and armed with heavy machinery. You're just
Right.
you're just a chick who is out for a boat party, and all hell broke loose.
And I kind of like that.
Yeah.
Because although I love that premise in Predator, where it's like, hey, these are like the toughest dudes ever to walk the earth. They're gods. And even they can't stand up to this thing. She's one woman, and she's a very average, normal person by, the
Any
stretch
and
of
all
the
measures.
imagination that,
Yeah.
that you need for this. Right.
Yeah, and so I dug that. I liked that premise. I liked that we saw her struggling to survive, but they worked well in the confines of how long of a movie they wanted to make. So there weren't, we didn't have to watch her learn how to fish for 15 minutes. We saw her go from like, I found this dead fish on the beach, and that was kind of gross, to like, okay, now I can use these little to make chum and get bigger fish. And she learned that stuff pretty quickly. But it makes sense, because that, like, everything that she seemed to learn at an expedited pace was the type of stuff that just goes, well, yeah, that makes sense. Like, anybody kind of with their wits about them in this situation could put that together. So I did appreciate, when you subtract the monster from it, I did appreciate the realism of a lot of the things that she did.
Mhm.
I think that when we start to move beyond premise into story is when the other two survivors show up. And that's when we start to get a little bit. We eventually figure out, like, okay, they were dating, and she's not happy, and now he's a dick, and all of this other stuff. And it
He
definitely
really
seemed,
was.
oh my god, like, hang this dude's shitty shirt from the rafters of douchebags in movies
Very,
that we have.
very few characters, I feel like, have made me want to punch them more
Oh
than
god, it
this
was
guy.
miserable.
Just his face. The
Yeah.
moment I saw his face, I'm like, I fucking hate this guy.
And so, and then again, working in the confines of the story, I don't know if I wanted more of the story of what happened on the life raft between the two that we get to see and the one that didn't make it. But they reference him, and they, oh, well, Mia says you're starting to sound like Zach. And it's like, well, what, like, I don't need a full blown flashback, but maybe I wanted a little bit more out of what happened with Zach. Like, did they go crazy and kill him for food? Did he go crazy because he saw the monster? I maybe wanted a little bit more out of that part of it. But the story part, I think, had peaks and valleys, but I think the premise part was really solid all the way up until we got a great showdown with the monster. We really did get something fun out of that final fight, because again, the kind of the antithesis of Predator, which was like, these guys are titans walking among us, and so they can hold their own against this. This was a desperation and will to live can carry you through a lot of things, even against something that can backhand you and take you 7 feet off the ground until you hit a tree. So there was an element of that that I did really like. Like I said, I was just kind of all over the place with this movie.
So my mind contextualized that lack of background that we're given. And I don't know if I'm reading too much into the movie, which I have a tendency to do, or if it's kind of like your headcanon from after
midnight.
That is lovely. And yet I didn't see anything of it in the movie. One of the themes that's explored in this movie is that of the hysterical Black woman, and how, as a not just a woman, but as a Black woman, your cries for help fall on deaf ears.
Right.
And people by and large have a tendency not to come to the assistance of women, particularly, but even more particularly Black women. And so I think that we aren't given any of the context for what her relationship with the hell was this asshole's name? Lucas.
Lucas, yeah.
Any of the background to her relationship with Lucas, because I have a feeling that we as the audience are being challenged to believe her, that she was unhappy with him, and that it really doesn't matter what actually happened. Doesn't matter what his side of the story is, because she was unhappy and she needed to do something about that. And he's proving that to us by not listening to her and by not giving any of the story that she tells him of what has happened on this island any sort of credence. And then it's not just him. Mia's not believing her either. And although I can't say I know exactly what this is like, I do know what it's like to kind of speak to a group of people that are seemingly peers and have them not understand where it is that you're coming from. Like, but why don't you get this? Like, you are like me, and you're not, like, you're not supporting me.
Right.
And that is, I think, the point of that story. Because if we were to have all the information and all the background, then it would make believing her easy. And I think the point of the story is to challenge audiences to say, you know, I don't need all the information. Your word is enough for me to go off of. You telling me that you don't feel safe should be enough. You telling me that there's danger here should be enough. Because how many times have, in real life, women said, hey, this guy's going to come back and he's going to do something. I know because it's happened before, or I know because I have a feeling, because he said something or because he did something that made me believe this, and then authorities do nothing.
Right.
And I think that that's really what this movie's about, where, like, yeah, it's a pretty badass monster movie with, I have to say, one of the coolest monster designs that I think we've seen in a while.
Yeah.
But beyond that, I think that Kiersey Clemons really gets to the heart of the theme of this movie, which is that we don't give Black women enough power in their voice. And unfortunately, that's kind of the way power works, is you can't just take it. It kind of has to be given to you. It has to be forfeited. And we don't give them enough power. The moment we decide as a society to start taking them seriously, then there will be some sort of movement on that.
Okay. See, and so I can I can see that now, right? Like looking back through it and kind of coming at it from that lens, from that angle. I can see where there was more to the subtext of this story than I have given it credit for the past 24 hours, because I can definitely see the telltale signs of those things. So maybe we did get like just enough story, right? And so and I guess the counter side to that is I think that there's a another side of that that could have been told with, like I said, expounding upon the idea of what happened to Lucas, and then us being forced to choose whether or not we were going to believe the two white people that are in the movie, right? Like we have
Right.
no choice but to believe what Kiersey Clemens, what Jennifer says, because we were there, we saw that, we know she's telling the truth. And so I think there's an interesting experiment if they had gone further into talking about what happened with Lucas, or not Lucas, with Zach, and Lucas is telling of that, and Mia's telling of that, and then deciding if that was also something we were going to believe. So I think that there's just a missed element there in a storytelling technique that could have put a little bit more on the audience of delivering that idea of believing what you're told because of who told it to you. Because I think that you're absolutely right with this idea of believing women being something that is an important part of this story, and definitely something that needs to be worked into movies more often. So I think that the other side of that could have been if Lucas told what happened to Zach and then did nothing but give her shit about the fact that maybe she didn't believe it or wasn't 100% bought in, then I think that you're now driving that point home even further, which is him saying, I don't know if I believe you, even though you're my girlfriend and I love you and support you and all of these things, but then also being enraged in a how could you not believe me moment. And so I think that what you have there is an excellent. I do think it's beyond headcanon. I will absolutely admit that I colored well outside the lines on my after midnight theory, right? Like I went to town on that. I do think that what you're doing here is wonderfully filling in the gaps of the subtext here that I won't say were lost on me, but that maybe I just didn't quite put together. So I will say that, but I do think that there is a little bit more they could have done that would have just made it context instead of subcontext, right? Like
Yeah.
you could have done this one extra little scene. The movie's only, like I said earlier, 82 minutes long. You could have done one more tiny scene that then really drove that point home when you show Lucas just getting so pissed off that she's not 100% bought into his story and so sympathetic to his plight of the fact that he had to kill his friend because of whatever happened. So then you sell this story of the angry white guy who just can't fathom the idea that his girlfriend would not take exactly what he says as gospel. And then I think that you sell that better while still not being ham-fisted about it. You just make it a major point instead of a blink and you miss it point.
I can't disagree with you. I also can't agree with you, but I can't disagree with you. Because I think that
I
would
solely admit that you exist, sir.
I think that to do that would have made the story more of a shared experience between the or a shared message between the stereotype of the hysterical black woman and the angry white man. And I think that to do that diminishes the story of Jen and emphasizes the story of Lucas. And I think that I think it was the right call not to do that, because I do think that it would have made it more clear. It definitely would have made it more clear. Because you're right, it is subtext. It definitely is subtext. But I think that it would have made the commentary on him more central to the story, and that, again, whether consciously or subconsciously, takes power away from her.
Okay. I can see that. Now I can understand where,
but I think we're arguing semantics at this point, and like what someone likes or doesn't like is I mean, it's subjective.
Well,
I think objectively, for me, so subjectively, it worked. Yeah, that made no sense.
That's like just sidebar. I kept hearing there's this morning radio show that I listen to here on sports radio, and one of the guys constantly uses the phrase false truths. It's like, that's not a word, Chief. You just mean falsehoods, like just things that are false.
Yeah, they're lies. Yeah.
Quit saying false truths when what you mean are things that are wrong.
Yeah. Or fake news. Just call it a fucking lie. Yeah.
So I can, like I said, I can see that side of it, right? Because Lucas is a supporting character who solely exists to prop up this idea of the story that they're telling us of Jen. So once you make the story any more about him, I don't know that I would use the phrase takes power away from, but it does take focus away from, because I can also see a moment where if you have this very explicit idea of a story that you're trying to tell about society not believing women, and then you go deeper and you go especially Black women, I think that if you open up that door at all for somebody to be like, oh, well, this guy's been through some shit, like, so it makes sense that he doesn't, then I think you're right. Then I think you're kind of leaving that door open for shitheads to walk through, right? Like those guys who I saw online yesterday that they're apparently discussing remaking American Psycho, right? And
why?
Fuck if I know. Right? Like it exists, and it's still what it is. I don't know how you change that. I don't see any reason to modernize it. It's still relevant.
Nothing improves upon that.
Right. Yeah. No, they're just gonna end up like shot for shot remaking it with fucking
it's the Psycho
Timothy Strongjaw. Yeah, like he's got a name.
That is who it would be, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
That's
Chalamet.
exactly who it's
Timothy Chalamet. There we go.
Yeah.
But I immediately like burst into this. It's one of those like rants that I always have in the chamber of that people who watch American Psycho, Breaking Bad, and Fight Club and root for Patrick Bateman, Walter White, and Tyler Durden just completely miss the
whole story.
They missed the entire idea, right?
Yeah, good for you, but
exactly. So if you do leave that door open, then suddenly those same dickheads walk through, and now they have somebody to closely relate to in this story, and it does start to it starts to muddy the waters on what story you're trying to tell, because then people have an argument for whose story is being told here, even though they shouldn't. But then again, like I said, if you watched Fight Club and thought that Tyler Durden was the hero, you fucking missed the point. So you can, I guess it does kind of eliminate the need for me to then add this to the growing list of you missed the fucking point movies, right? So I'll give you that.
That was a beautiful way to say, I agree and disagree.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what I was after there.
So since we agree and disagree on the movie, maybe we can just agree or entirely disagree, one or the other, on our cast. So in a section that we're calling survivors, is there anyone here that stood out to you? And that's kind of a stupid question,
Right?
but we
Look,
have to ask it.
we got 3 people here to talk about.
Mhm.
Right? And I am willing
And
to
all
say,
of them are Kiersey Clements.
right, exactly. And I am willing to say that for one of the first times in the history of this show, I do think that this is a section where at this point, if we disagree on anything outside of something minor or a semantic, then we need to end the show.
Yeah.
Because I think that when you look at the cast here, everybody is cut and dry, exactly what they're supposed to be, and then played that role to perfection. Whether they had tons of time on screen, whether they were only there for a few minutes, I think that out of these 3 people that we got, everybody gave us exactly what we needed and then some. So when you look at Kiersey Clements, we'll just start there because, like I said, there's 3, so we're both going to get a chance to talk. You look at this character of Jen, and you get a woman who, in the beginning, is just happy to be alive, and then immediately wheels start turning. And you see somebody go into survival mode, which when you watch a movie like this is always a tipping point on how good that movie's going to be. Is how believable is it that suddenly they can do all of these things that are necessary to survive? I love to have the, oh, what if I woke up tomorrow and zombies were everywhere moment. But chances are, right, I'm just going to eat something that's spoiled because the power's out and I'm going to shit myself to death. Like let's call a spade because I'm going to get hungry. I'm a bigger dude. And I'm like, I bet it's okay. Next thing you know, got dysentery, dying like it's the Oregon Trail.
Yeah.
So
I have already actually eaten once in my life, and I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm not that sorry though, because the story's maybe it's not that great. I've actually eaten an expired can of ravioli.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it did not go over well. Every single joint in my body became
ravioli
inflamed, and basically that's what it was. I couldn't move, man. It was awful, which means that getting to the toilet so you don't shit yourself is a challenge. It's a real challenge.
Right, exactly. And we're fucking nerds. That's how we go out. That's how we go out in the zombie apocalypse, right? So when you look at a survival movie, there's always an absolute tipping point on whether or not it's believable that suddenly this character can do all of these things. I think that one thing that Kiersey Clements gave us out of Jen that was so amazing was nothing she did seemed like she suddenly had some ridiculous amount of knowledge that wouldn't have made any sense for this girl to have based on the limited background that we have of her. And I think that that's one of the absolute selling points of Jen as a character is that I never found myself going like, how would she know how to do that? Right. She's not tying elaborate knots around things. She's not suddenly digging 8-foot holes in one afternoon in the sand.
It's all very basic survival instincts.
Right. So I think that everything that she gave us, combination of writing into the character and the way that she portrayed it, was very realistic. And I think that that is a major thing that makes her a great character.
Agreed. I liked that she was very much, at least upon presentation, because it's very possible that the life that she leads back home is something entirely different. But she seemed very normal. Yeah. She seemed very much somewhere around the average person. She was not physically imposing. She was not this, buff superwoman by the end of the movie. She was who she was. Yeah. And I absolutely appreciated that. And I think that one of the beautiful things about survival movies is that when you take someone who is more or less a representation of the average person, what you come to find is that people as a whole are amazing, powerful people by themselves.
Yeah.
And that we just often aren't in an environment where we need to kick in that sort of superhero mode. And she did, and wow, just fucking blew me away. And then the way that she understands that she needs to take care of herself because neither Lucas nor Mia are going to have her best interest at heart. I absolutely loved, because I'm at a point in my life where I think when I was younger, I might have sacrificed a little bit of myself for Lucas and Mia and said, you know what, they're not ready to go yet. I'm going to wait for them. But I'm at a point in my life right now, and I don't know why or how my journey got me here, where I am, where Jen is, where it's like, I'm leaving and you can come with me or you can not, but I'm going to go. And I would love for you to come with me. But if you don't, I'll remember you fondly. And I absolutely loved that. Fuck Mia.
Oh.
Fuck Lucas. Because I really wish that she had gotten on that raft and escaped. But also, had she done that, very likely the monster would have gotten her, because we saw what happens towards the end of the movie. So I think that Kiersey Clemons, we talked about her when we talked about Antebellum.
Right.
And she was one of the actresses that we talked about when we were talking about this particular section in Antebellum. There's something special about her. Whatever it is, whatever that X factor is, she's got it, because whether it's in Antebellum or in Sweetheart, whether we're talking like the DC Universe movies, because I think that she absolutely knocks it out of the park as Iris West. I'm here for her. I want to see more of her, and I hope that she keeps acting in genre movies, because I feel like she brings a sense of gravitas to everything she does, because this very easily could have been a something that she phoned in.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. And I think that it definitely helped the movie become the movie that it is, which is a survival movie that I'm willing to watch again, because as much as I love Castaway, I could count on one hand the amount of times I've seen Castaway.
Right. Yeah, it's a slog.
Yeah.
And so I think that another moment that really sold not only Kiersey Clemons' acting ability, but also just the character of Jen, and this idea that we're actively working against the trope of the hysterical woman, is the fact that after being knocked out with a boat oar, she wakes up tied to a tree. And while there's an initial struggle, as we would all do upon realizing that we were tied to a tree, there's not that really tropey moment of like sliding into becoming a complete stereotype and panicking and screaming and calling names and stuff like that. You know, she pulls against it, realizes it, she's like, and you tied me up, really? Like, and that's, you know, that's the whole thing. And so when you look at a moment like that and you go, wow, they really are pointing out the fact to us that there's absolutely no reason for them to not believe her or think that she would be hysterical, because they just knocked her unconscious with a paddle and then tied her to a tree. And she's still the most level-headed one on the island.
Yeah.
You know, she was absolutely in that moment the smartest and most collected person in that group of people. And so when you look at a moment like that, you really do understand that part of the story that they were trying to sell. And you really do start to understand kind of where that that subtext is. So all of that was great, but then also just like you said, gravitas, that's the word that it keeps coming back to, because in that moment, as woman tied to tree while being chastised by her dog shit boyfriend, she still owned that. That was still 100% about her. There was never a moment where I was like, this chick is bad news, even though that's the story that Lucas was actively telling us.
Right.
A dark cloud follows you and everything is shit when you're around. And it's like, bro, you're dating her. Like,
as much as I hated him from the beginning, there was something about him. I'm like, fuck this guy. When he says, you told me you were unhappy, and then a storm rolled in. Like, you're fucking blaming her for the environment.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
For the weather. Like, can
she's
you
a witch?
Can you be any more fucking awful?
Yeah. And so, but she still holds it together right in that moment. So, Lucas, I love you, but this isn't the time. Like, this isn't what we need to be discussing right now. And she's still just trying to get her point across, because at this point it's dark. Like, they're fucked, and she knows that. And Kirstie Clemons just, like I said, she just owned that role. I was so 100% in on, like, if our perspective from that moment had been, we're on the raft with Lucas and Mia, and then we showed up on the island, and then we get that scene, I'm going, maybe we should be listening to this chick, because she's oddly calm for somebody that you seem convinced is hysterical. Right? She's very matter of fact for someone who you don't believe. I've heard people rant and rave about things. I've read plenty.
I've ranted and raved a bit myself.
Exactly. There's a fervor that comes with ranting and raving, especially if it is something that solely exists in your head or something that you're actively making up. I have ranted and raved about shit that I'm making up while I'm saying it. And it comes with
I like that.
And it comes with a weight that denotes hysteria, because you're trying to convince them that if you believe it this much, it must be true. She never did that, because she didn't need to do that, because she knew she was in the right. And she never just absolutely dominated him with all of these ideas. She very calmly and as collected as a person can be while tied to a tree, continued to just say, we've got to go. And so, like I said, even if we had been on the raft this whole time, in that moment, I would still be on her side, even if I had never seen the monster. So let's get to the others, right? We've only got 3. Tell me about Lucas.
Yeah. I've talked about how much I hate this character, but truth be told, I think we're supposed to hate him. So, so I think that Emery Cohen does a really great job at weaning us off of because the when she first sees him, that embrace is everything.
Right.
And it's like, oh, you finally found someone. You've got someone. Now you can get off this island, because he's here. He's going to help you. He's going to be there for you. He's going to console you. He's going to do whatever you need him to do so that you get off this island, because I don't care about him from the moment that he arrived. And I don't think you're supposed to. I don't care about him. I don't care about Mia. All I want is for Jen to get off this island. But very quickly, it's the turn happens very quickly, but it's a very steady decline.
Right.
From the noticing of the dried blood on the knife to the way that he and Mia are discussing leaving the island. There's something there. And I know that it's just suggested, but it's like, man, these two were bumping uglies the entire time they were on that raft.
Gross.
And maybe that's why this guy died. Because he woke up and he was like, hey, what's going on here? And it's like, shank. You know, I don't know.
Well, I'm glad you went shank with that noise, because I was like, what did they do to Zach?
That was a knife entering the body.
There was a squelch, as subtitles have taught me watching horror movies.
Not something else. That's
a squelch, not a skeet, is what we're getting at here, people. No longer subtext.
Right. So I think he did a really good job of that, and I think it's partly the way that it was written. It was really, really well written. J.D. Dillard, right, is the writer director, and boy, did he do a fantastic job with all these characters, because I feel like even when they weren't there for very long, they still felt like people. And I think that's really difficult to do, particularly in a movie where it's like you have no context about this person, and these other characters that are coming in, they're really just foils. They're there so that we know more about the main character. And man, that's fantastic.
Yeah. Living in a college town, I have met and know quite a few Lucases, right?
Mm-hmm.
These guys who have money and feel like that the world owes it to them because they have the money. So there's definitely a realism to that character too.
Mm-hmm.
There is something about the way that Lucas spoke that bothered me, and it's surely because of personal experiences. So I understand, and I've been in many a relationship in my life, and I understand that there are a lot of times when we is the proper pronoun. There are lots of times when we is how you should be talking.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of completely losing oneself in a relationship and only using the pronoun we, slightly annoying. The idea of hiding behind the pronoun we because you don't have the sack to say that there's something that you believe, when suddenly like he didn't have the fucking balls to just stand up and go, you know what? I don't believe you. So instead of that, he says, we don't think it's the right idea, referencing him and Mia. We think that maybe we should hang up and get our strength back, right? Once you start hiding behind those plural pronouns and putting yourself in a situation where you're looking out for the greater good, instead of just being able to put it on the table and express your opinions, my respect for you plummets. I fucking hate that. I cannot stand when people do that. And then he takes it one step further. So then he goes as far as to then completely remove himself from the equation and throw Mia under the bus when he says, Mia says you're starting to act a lot like Zach.
Yeah.
Like, dude, fuck you. Like, so you have no opinion. Your only opinion is that this girl owes you everything because you've paid for her school and took her out on a boat with your friends, that I'm going to go out on a limb and assume are shitty because they choose to be friends with you. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I wouldn't have a good time out on a boat with you dickheads either. So I don't blame her for at least telling you that she's not. I don't blame her for not having fun. And I commend her for having more ball sack than apparently this guy's ever dreamed of, to then tell him, I'm not happy. Everything that this dude did until his one final heroic moment is bullshit. And it absolutely paints him as this meager, pathetic boy wearing his daddy's suit in the form of money.
That's exactly it.
And it was incredible. And then the writing of this is so great. he doesn't even get his heroic moment because she saved herself. And the only fucking thing he did was be there so the monster left her alone. The greatest thing this guy did in his life that we experienced was be cannon fodder. And based on what I know of him and the girl that he chooses to hang out with, and I am then going to use the transitive theory to say his friends are the same. The only good thing he ever did was survive in a way that allowed a much greater human being to survive longer than him. All of that being said, you're right in that Emery Cohen, that's his name. Emery Cohen did such a fucking great job that I'm this enraged at a dude who spent 8.5 minutes on the screen.
Yeah.
It's the wrestling heel thing that I always go back to. There's hating somebody because they suck and they're not doing anything for you. And there's hating someone that you're supposed to hate. And that just means that the person portraying that character was awesome. So shout out to Henry Cohen, because absolutely in my time on Shiver, this dude's face is on the Rushmore of dickheads that we have put in these, that we have watched in these movies. So he did such an amazing job in such a short time that I love Emery Cohen for this and hate Lucas at the same time. So we always talk about what makes somebody memorable. What made him memorable is the fact that he was an amazing antithesis to everything that we had spent all the time up until that moment establishing Jen as, and that was incredible.
Yeah.
So we've discussed these. Look, we've said Mia's name. That's all she deserves, right?
Yeah.
She exists, and she also did her job.
Again, so that we have an understanding here. Hannah Mangan Lawrence did a fantastic job with Mia.
Correct.
It's not that the performance wasn't good. The performance was great, and that's why Mia sucks.
Exactly. So there are those three, and we've discussed them, but there's one more. And in a section that we're calling Charlie, we're going to talk about the monster. Now, if you're seeing this movie and you're wondering why we're calling this section Charlie, as we're wont to do here on Shiver, we do a little bit of research, sometimes a lot, but we always try to read a little bit. And on set, they did refer to the monster as Charlie. So that is what we will be referring to him as moving forward. Dave, you hinted at it a little bit earlier. Just come on out and say it. What did you think about Charlie?
I think that this is one of the coolest monster designs that we've ever seen.
Hell yeah.
And I think that not since The Shape of Water have I been so impressed with the monster design. And the thing is, Shape of Water owes a lot to the creature from the Black Lagoon. It makes zero hiding of that. Like, it's like, this is what I'm trying to be. This is a modern creature from the Black Lagoon, and I love it for that. But this is totally different. But I think it's just as good a monster design as that. The other thing that I really love about this is that it doesn't move like most of the monsters that we see today.
Yeah.
Most of the monsters that we see today have that very like jagged movement thing that has been very popular. I would have to say probably since like Samara. From The Ring. You know, so it's not a new thing. It's definitely been around for a while. But it is effective. It's very effective because it's not very human. It's very animalistic. In fact, it's very insect. And I love that. I love that it's so foreign that it's like humans, people don't move this way. Therefore, it is monster. Therefore, it is scary. There is a sort of humanoid movement to this thing.
Right.
And I think that is part of what is so scary about this, because anything that evolves in water doesn't evolve like you and I.
Right.
So I found myself thinking, and maybe it's just because I'm a super nerd, but I found myself thinking, how would a creature like this come about? And then I stopped myself and I'm like, don't go down that rabbit hole, because that's not the point of this movie.
Right.
Right. But it's like, it comes from this deep, deep pit in the middle of the ocean. It has legs and not just legs, but inverted knees like a goat,
Right.
right? So it's like I'm definitely getting like devil demon vibes from this thing. You know, the traditional the Western devil of like the goat legs and all that, like that is definitely in play here. But also like the skin is almost like the skin of a shark. And this thing
Mm-hmm.
goes after sharks. Like it left the fish
Yeah.
on the beach, but it went after the sharks. Almost like it was offended by these things.
Right.
Because it didn't just eat them. It was like, no, I clawed these things to death. But then it also went after people. And so I was like, man, what the fuck is this thing?
It's something
How?
with a vendetta against things that dare to call themselves apex predators.
Yeah, that's exactly what in the ocean, and it's the ultimate predator on land.
Yeah.
But it looks like neither of those things because the head is vaguely shark-like, but it's vaguely human. There is some, and then obviously they make mention of this. There's a current drawing everything to this island.
Mm-hmm.
I wondered at one point, like, are they actually dead and this is some form of like purgatory or something like that? And I stopped caring at one point, and I was just like, I just want to see more of this monster. I just want to see more of Kiersey Clemens outsmarting the monster, figuring out how this thing works. And I think that in a movie where there isn't much going on, what is going on is spectacular. And if this movie had what was the budget of this thing?
I'm not showing on the Wikipedia budget.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the budget is, but it had Blumhouse money.
Right.
So it wasn't an insignificant amount of money. I'm assuming it had to have blown 90% of the budget on this monster.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Whatever wasn't spent on filming on location was spent on this monster, and I loved it.
Yeah, there was a moment while watching this where it was like, oh man, is this going to be the type of thing where we're going to feel the budget of this movie being low because we're never going to get a good glimpse of that monster. You know, we keep catching just the legs or just a little bit of the head, or everything's quick cuts and you kind of see it. And so there was a good moment there where I was like, I don't want to I don't want to get blue balled by this monster, right? Like
Right.
I need to see it. Like I've got to. This is an absolute must for me. But then we got to see it. And this is one of the cooler monsters that we have ever done. I mean, this is on par with how cool Pumpkinhead was, right? But with a much more fluid movement because of where special effects are now and the combination of practical and CGI. So this monster is absolutely amazing. So cool looking. I loved the idea that it knew it could outrun her on land. She could outrun it on land. So it jumps into the water and like darts past her to get in front. And just how smart that is, right? That predator ideal of, okay, she's beating me, but I've got a trick left and I need to get in front of her. And this time I'm going to do it. And that scene was so cool. The first time she actually kind of squares off with it. And it jumps into the water where it is the superior being. And so, and it takes off. I love the fact that she knew from that moment on that if water were an option, she was going to lose. So she traps it in this ring of fire. You know, she pulls it out of its element where we've seen it do well on land, but now she's making nothing but land an option, and it knew it was screwed. That's what always gets me with creature work, right? Is how much shows up through body movement. That's the reason that we always end up back to the same guys, right? Circus, Jones, these same guys that through Perlman through inches of makeup and prosthetic are still portraying emotion, right? These same guys always end up doing that. This was some ballerina from Australia that played Charlie in this thing. And when those fires go off and we get that look on his face, and he gives you kind of like the dog new metal head tilt, and you're like, oh man, this guy knows he's in trouble. And so then suddenly we get this weird moment where we're seeing the monster in survival mode now too. And all of that came across without a word being said. And I love that it's portrayed as fast, as strong, as dominant on the land as and in the water. I love that its home is just a hole in the bottom of the sea. Right? Like that's we assume that's where it lives. We see it drag people down there, And so again, the bottom of the ocean is terrifying. There's statistics and numbers on the very small percentage of the bottom of the ocean that we've actually accurately mapped or know what the fuck is down there. If you're unaware of how terrifying the bottom of the ocean is, go to YouTube. There are videos of people who send down drones way deeper than people can go. And the shit that survives down there is scary. It's all horrifying. It's called the abyssal zone for a reason. Like it's scary down there, and that's where this thing's from.
Just Google an anglerfish.
Yes, exactly.
And never sleep again.
Yeah, a vampire squid, and then
my god,
yeah, and then hit the DMs as to why we just gave you more nightmare fuel, right? But that's where this thing is from. And it dominates all that. And it's so fucking good down there that it came up here and it got the sharks. And then it's so good at the sharks that, oh, what are you on this island over by my hole? Hey, fuck you. Like that. No, that's my island too.
Yeah.
It was just, and all of this, without a word being said, without any background on what this thing was, we're never told it's a demon, it's an alien, it's this, it's that. It's evolved from some weird tribal people that were forced into the ocean. We didn't need any of that. Not a damn bit. We just got a monster that was so cool that we're good with it. And I loved that. And I loved that they teased it for just the right amount of time before they finally showed it to us. And when we got it in all of its splendor, it's worth every bit of the wait.
Absolutely. And that leaves us with just one thing left to do, which is to rate this movie. So we haven't discussed a rating system yet. Did you have something in mind?
I did not. I kind of went with I was kind of thinking abandoned Cokes.
Okay. I was thinking suitcase rafts.
Suitcase rafts, even better. There we go.
Okay. Because everything else that I can come up with has to do with Kiersey Clemens, and I'm uncomfortable speaking about it publicly in that way. So then Daniel, out of a possible 5, and before we do this, I almost forgot. If this is your first time listening to Shiver, this might seem weird to you. Why the fuck are these guys talking about like a rating system? Like just use stars like normal people, right? Well, here's the thing, is that normal people get this wrong.
Correct.
So you have to go to the Abby normal people to get it right. We only rate movies against themselves. We don't think that, as much as we've mentioned other movies, we don't think that Sweetheart should be rated against Predator or Castaway. Or His House, which we mentioned at the top of the show. We think it should only be rated against itself. Love movies for what they are, not for what they aren't. So that's why we choose a unique rating system for every single movie. So then, Daniel, out of a possible 5 suitcase rafts, how many suitcase rafts do you give this?
So, like I said at the top, there's something about this that was missed on me, and like I have said so many times on the show, one of the I love the show for many reasons. I love that people listen to it and then they tell us their opinions. I love hanging out with you every week, but the number one thing I love about this show is it does take the absolute word cloud of shit that's in my brain and put it on some sort of highway and make it linear. And I love that then you create pit stops along that that then give me a chance to step away for a second, think about what I'm doing next. I was unsure about how I was going to go into this, and I was on the fence as to whether I was going to go 3, 3.5. Right. And so now I'm more on the fence 3.5, 4, because I think that this kind of social story of the hysterical Black woman that I knew was there, but I hadn't aligned with everything that I was thinking is now in play. I do have to dock it a little bit because, like I said, I wanted a little bit more out of the score. And I would have liked more of Lucas's story, even though I absolutely see your point about it taking away from what was they wanted to present, but I would have enjoyed that a little bit more. So I'm going to deduct half a suitcase wrath for both of those, and I'm going to let this sit solidly at 4 suitcase wrath.
And that's exactly where I am. I think that it was a little slow at times, which it's going to be if you have a movie that's carried by one actor, and that one actor is really doing everything here. Like, there's beautiful photography that's happening here. The shots are gorgeous. And I mean, it was done in Fiji, you know, and you kind of know what you're going to get when you're shooting a movie in Fiji, but it's visually stunning. The score, what is there, you're right. I do wish there was more on one level, but then on another level, I think, you know, the lack of sound plays into the isolation that she's feeling. And for me, I think this movie has such strong themes that when the rest of the movie plays into those themes, it only supports it. And so I can kind of reconcile that. That being the case, it is something that needs to be reconciled, and it isn't perfect, which is why it's not going to get a 5. I think that I can watch Kiersey Clemons do anything, and would gladly watch her play any role in any movie. And I'm kind of going down that rabbit hole again, where I'm getting uncomfortable about what I'm thinking about her. I'm sorry to my wife, and I'm sorry to Kiersey Clemons, and to everyone that loves her. So 4 suitcase rafts.
So there you go. I mean, a solid 4, unanimous 4, and this movie was great. You know, like we said at the top, it's if you listen to us every week, it's easy to think that we didn't like something as much as something else, and it's easy to go, well, it's kind of downhill, but it's because we take these movies as they come. Right, you go back and look at January. If you missed January, we started off way up high, and then it was a mixed bag. We kind of go all over the place, and that's what we like. Because if we just made a show where all we did was rave about the things that we love, that would get boring, right? We've got to experience new things. We got to be able to talk about it. Ultimately, this movie is very, very good, sitting solidly at a 4. So make sure you head to shiverpod.com, where you can find links to not only all of our social media outlets. We're on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and X. But you can also find link to our TeePublic store, where you can get a shirt with our awesome logo on it. You can get our amazing original design with Dave and I as Frankenstein's monsters. We had a lot of fun having that created. Also, make sure you follow us on Instagram. Next month, we'll start the Year of the Monster, and we'll be kicking off with zombie movies. So make sure you follow us on Instagram to figure out exactly which ones we'll be doing. Pretty sure we've got a solid 4 picked out. So we will let you know how that goes. And I think that's just about it. Anything else, Dave?
No, that is it. So on behalf of all of us here at Shiver, fright you very much.